Our protagonist and his sister possess a gift that many desire, immortality. However, this gift turned out to be a curse. They were exploited by a guild that claimed to be the saviors of humanity, but in truth, they were nothing more than monsters. The guild members repeatedly killed the siblings to gain experience and level up. One fateful day, the siblings managed to escape, and the protagonist vowed to reveal the truth about these imposters to the world and ensure they face justice for their actions. Our story begins in the midst of a fierce conflict, placing us right at the center of a crucial battle that not only affects the protagonists but also decides the fate of everyone involved. The Demon King sits on his throne, surrounded by bizarre and fearsome creatures, while one of our heroes, Saia, a skilled swordsman, stands before him. As the battle commences, Saia lunges forward, attacking the strange creatures with his sword and quickly demonstrating his exceptional swordsmanship by taking down many of them. He calls out to a massive warrior named Chikara to join the fight. However, when they attempt to strike at the Demon King together, they are taken aback by his violent response, as he unleashes a massive burst of fire, warning them that they are insignificant compared to him. At that moment, a sorceress named Aya appears, conjuring a massive ice barrier to shield them from the raging flames. She reassures them with a smile that none of them has been harmed. Saia acknowledges her help, while Chikara comments on the damage they've sustained. Before he can finish, a pair of hands reaches out from behind, offering healing potions. The owner of these hands, Turu, provides the potions to Saia and Chikara. After drinking the potions, Saia and Chikara turn to their fifth comrade, Haruto, the leader of the team, asking if he is ready to fight. Haruto steps forward to confront the Demon King, who is taken aback by his overwhelming power as their battle continues. The scene then shifts to a celebration as news spreads about the S-rank hunter guild, Byakuran, successfully defeating the Demon King. It's revealed that the portal from which these creatures emerged had been open for nearly 200 years, allowing monsters to threaten human lives during that time. The news broadcast highlights Byakuran's victory over one of the 7 Demon Kings, emphasizing the significance of this achievement. Next, the focus turns to the streets, where a reporter named Sato meets the members of Byakuran. Led by Haruto, the heroes are welcomed by cheering crowds celebrating their success. Sato approaches to interview them, congratulating them on their victory. Speaking for his team, Haruto expresses gratitude, emphasizing that their achievement was made possible by the support of people worldwide. When Sato inquires about how they gained such immense power as S-rank hunters, the team falls silent, unsure of how to reply. Haruto quickly regains his composure and states that their strength comes from daily training. After the interview, the team finds themselves in a different location, where Saia sarcastically laughs at Haruto's explanation, suggesting that his mention of daily training was merely a joke. Chikara, also laughing, responds that Haruto wasn't entirely mistaken. The sorceress Aya then insists that they do train hard every day. The alchemist Turu smirks, adding that in the end, it's their job, and they can't escape it. Haruto smiles, emphasizing the importance of their work and questioning if they think otherwise. Suddenly, he calls out to 2 individuals, referring to them as monsters. 2 figures are revealed, chained to the wall, a young man named Makoto and his sister Minori. Their weary expressions indicate they have been imprisoned for a long time. Haruto and the team approach the siblings, but when they don't respond, Haruto comments on how some beings can be quite stubborn. He tells the brothers that, thanks to them, he and his team have grown stronger, and their power continues to rise. As he steps closer to express his gratitude, Makoto unexpectedly strikes with his sword. Everyone is shocked to see Haruto his attack decisively. It becomes clear that in their world, strength and experience aren't gained just by fighting ordinary beings. A warrior must face specific creatures to level up. However, defeating beings that do not naturally perish can also enhance a fighter's strength. Moments later, Makoto regains his composure as if nothing had happened. Haruto stands, smiling at his newfound power and progress. He wipes his sword clean and tells Makoto that their ability to recover offers them limitless opportunities to refine their skills. At this point, Makoto and Minori appear completely drained and unable to keep up with their opponents. Chikara steps forward, attacking with overwhelming strength and quickly inflicting serious damage on one of them. Without hesitation, Aya intervenes, unleashing a powerful surge of fire energy toward Minori, significantly weakening her. After some time, the 2 siblings regain their strength, and Turu approaches Minori, presenting her with a new challenge to test her endurance. Meanwhile, Saia pushes his brother Makoto to his combat limits. Once everyone reaches their desired level, Haruto declares their training for the day a success. However, Chikara insists it's still not enough, expressing his determination to become even stronger. Aya sighs, calling him obsessed with power and admitting her exhaustion. Saia adds that he too has had enough for the day and needs some time to relax. Then they notice Turu sitting at his computer, looking uneasy. When asked what's bothering him, he reveals that he's been struggling to gather information as efficiently as he once did. Saia advises him to take it easy, reminding him that he's been working hard and should enjoy himself a little. Turu then turns to Minori, presenting her with a new challenge, but he feels that everything has become repetitive and dull. Haruto pauses for a moment, acknowledging that things have grown monotonous for all of them. He looks at Minori, who is chained before them, contemplating the situation. After a brief moment, he approaches Turu and suggests that they try something new, testing a different aspect of her abilities. Turu looks at him in astonishment, as if struck by a brilliant idea, and praises his intelligence. He adds that their focus has always been on combat, but they've never considered other ways to enhance their skills. Turu then turns to the sorceress Aya, asking her to use her magic to assist with this new challenge, to which she immediately agrees. She begins chanting a spell to test its effects, but suddenly Minori appears, fully aware of her surroundings and their intentions. At that moment, Saia interrupts them, suggesting they pause for a moment and expressing his desire to join. Aya laughs, noting that everyone enjoys a challenge, but she is even more surprised when Haruto tells her to release Makoto from his restraints. When she asks why, he smiles with amusement, saying it's intriguing to watch his sister go through this without being able to intervene. Haruto continues, stating that this will be quite an exciting show. Aya follows his orders, and Makoto finds himself suddenly freed from his restraints. As he tastes freedom, he sees his sister being taken away and quickly tries to get up to chase after them, shouting for them to stop. Before he can move, Aya uses her magic to restrain him, preventing any advance. Haruto laughs mockingly at Makoto, telling him that tonight he will watch the show from a different perspective. He explains that sacred magic, unlike fire or other attacks, has a unique effect, adding that the restraints he now bears are blocking him from recovering his strength. Overwhelmed with frustration and anger, Makoto shouts that he will never forgive them and will find a way to end this, but before he can finish, Haruto silences him with his sword, rendering him unable to speak. Haruto stands over him, stating that it's better for him to remain silent, as tonight is not a night for words, but for watching. He adds that if Makoto wants to assign blame, he should blame his own fate. Feeling utterly powerless as he watches what is happening to his sister, Makoto hears Haruto telling Turu that they need to leave now due to important meetings abroad. Turu responds that he also needs to return to handle some unfinished business. Haruto laughs as they exit the cell, teasing Turu for being the only one concerned about such matters. Turu replies that everyone has their own way of thinking, then notes that they haven't placed any new restraints on the siblings. Haruto responds that if they wake Aya now, she will be furious, and in any case, escaping won't be easy. He instructs Turu to ensure the cell is securely locked. After they leave, Makoto is seen lying on the ground, still bound by magic and in immense pain. Suddenly, he feels a hand pulling the sword from his body, the pain surging as it is removed, and he realizes it was Minori who did it. However, he is even more shocked when he sees her take the sword and press it against herself. He shouts at her to stop and not to harm herself, but Minori is in a deeply distressed state, overwhelmed by everything she has endured. She struggles to contain her emotions, repeatedly saying she can't take it anymore. Pleading with her older brother Makoto, she begs him to find a way to end her suffering. In that moment, Makoto recalls Haruto's words about the pain he experiences due to halted regeneration and realizes there might be a way to free his sister from her agony. He asks her to use the weapon to sever his arm, believing this could be the solution. Minori hesitates, taking the weapon but unable to bring herself to hurt him. She apologizes for her inability to do it, but he reassures her, explaining that their bodies, as immortal beings, only regenerate when facing fatal damage. He urges her to continue and fulfill his request. After a moment's hesitation, she finally cuts off his arm, overwhelmed with emotional pain and apologizing once more for causing him such suffering. Makoto tells her she's doing the right thing and asks her to strike his heart next, assuring her that this will allow him to return even stronger. Driven by desperation to restore her brother, Minori forces herself to follow through, stabbing his heart with the weapon. At that moment, she is suddenly overwhelmed by a powerful surge of energy radiating from his body, and she's shocked when a notification appears, indicating that her level has increased. Makoto has completely restored his body and stands up again. Still stunned, Minori asks him why her level increased. That's when Makoto finally understands what has happened. Minori also realizes the implications and asks her brother if he understands what she's thinking. However, Makoto disagrees, insisting she cannot do that. She clarifies that she isn't thinking of having him kill her, but rather that he will use her to kill them. She then states that they must take revenge on all who have wronged them. Makoto hesitates at first, but recalling everything they have endured together, he agrees to her plan, telling her they will execute it immediately. Thus, the siblings take turns killing each other repeatedly. First Makoto kills Minori, then she kills him in the next round. They continue this cycle without stopping, growing immensely stronger through the pain and suffering they endure, all in pursuit of their revenge. The story then shifts back to the beginning of Haruto's team at the Byakuran Guild, where Turu was known as an S-rank member responsible for carrying the team's equipment. He was characterized by his quiet demeanor and often seen as a coward, but those who interacted with him recognized he was an enigmatic individual who was hard to comprehend. 3 years before the current events, Turu was at the guild, securing a creature onto a dissection table in preparation for examination. At that moment, Haruto entered and remarked on Turu's dedication to his work. Turu was surprised that Haruto had come just to say that, but Haruto continued, stating that his work was fascinating. He then asked Turu if he would be interested in dissecting something even more intriguing. Intrigued by Haruto's words, Turu followed him to a secluded room in the guild, one that was rarely entered by others. Before they entered, Haruto had already gathered the entire team and asked if they desired fame and glory. The team was puzzled by his question, so Haruto clarified that they now had the opportunity to step into the spotlight and make their presence known. He continued, stating that the future ahead was filled with a glory that no human had ever achieved before. However, he added that the price for this was to be trapped in darkness, with no way to escape it ever again. After revealing this truth, he asked them if they still wished to stay with him and pursue the path of glory he was offering. Chikara immediately responded, affirming their unity and shared goal. Saia echoed Chikara's sentiment, expressing his agreement. Haruto then opened a door leading to a staircase that descended beneath the room, instructing them to follow him. He assured them he would lead them to a future filled with fame and recognition. Without hesitation, Haruto moved ahead, with everyone following closely behind. Turu admitted he had never known such a place even existed. Chikara speculated that this underground space was likely used by the guild in the past to imprison its enemies and those who opposed it. Haruto then opened another door, an electronic one that could only be unlocked with the fingerprints of all 5 of his fingers. The others stood behind him, uncertain about what he was about to reveal. When the door opened, Haruto presented them with Makoto and his sister Minori, revealing that he had kidnapped and restrained them in this chamber. The entire team was left in shock at the sight of the 2 captives and immediately voiced their concerns, telling Haruto that this was a terrible idea. However, Haruto reassured them, urging them not to worry. He explained that although Makoto and Minori appeared human, their blood was entirely different. Stepping closer to the captured siblings, he revealed they were members of the Immortal clan, a group thought to be extinct. Suddenly, he drew his sword and struck Makoto, slicing through half of his face without hesitation or regard for him as a person. He then told the others that Makoto's body would now regenerate the damaged part. Stunned, the team asked if the Immortal clan, believed to have perished, still existed. They were fascinated by this revelation but didn't understand how it connected to the glory Haruto spoke of. At that moment, Haruto raised his phone and told them to take a look. He explained that the application he was running was a level measuring app, one that had been present since he joined the guild. This app categorizes a member's rank based on their physical strength and magical power, allowing them to fight against ferocious creatures. He continued, explaining that the guild is classified as rank A, meaning that any member with a level below 20 cannot join. What surprised the team, however, was that Haruto's level had now reached 50. Haruto continues by explaining that the usual method for increasing one's level is by fighting and defeating monsters, but this can be dangerous. If a fighter isn't cautious enough, they could lose their life. He clarifies that they can use these individuals for that purpose. At that moment, Minori is stabbed in the stomach with a sword, the blade piercing through her body right before their eyes. Haruto tells them that they can now easily raise their levels. The first to express excitement about this revelation is Turu, who exclaims how incredible it is. He pulls a knife from his pocket and approaches Minori, eagerly expressing his enthusiasm for understanding the human body and its weak points. He stabs Minori with the knife, asking her how it feels, and then continues to stab her frantically in different parts of her body, questioning her about the sensations of her body being torn apart. Afterward, he realizes that his level has indeed increased, filling him with overwhelming joy. He steps closer to Minori, removes the blindfold from her eyes, and expresses his admiration for her beauty along with his immense happiness. He then asks her to tell him more about herself. Afterward, he resumes tearing into her body with frenzied excitement, wondering whether she would survive if poisoned or anesthetized, or if her brain were separated. He also ponders how long she could stay alive if her organs were offered as food for insects. Witnessing this scene, Saia comments to the siblings that they truly resemble immortal monsters. He and the rest of the team then smile, agreeing that since they are not human, treating them this way is acceptable. Meanwhile, Haruto watches, enjoying the brutal torture inflicted upon the siblings and encouraging the team by saying they are doing a great job. He then turns to Makoto and Minori, telling them that handling them is easy and that their usefulness will greatly benefit the team. Returning to the present, the day arrives for the team to depart for the interviews Haruto mentioned at the airport. Chikara, dressed in a formal suit, expresses his surprise at being part of this interview. Aya responds by asking whether muscular individuals like him feel uncomfortable in formal attire. Meanwhile, Saia is preoccupied with observing everything around him and asks where Turu is. Haruto replies that he is certainly with his doll bride and wants to continue his new experiment. Saia remarks that Turu seems full of energy. Later, at the guild building, Turu returns to resume his previous activities. He enters his cell, laughing with excitement, opens the door, and addresses Minori, saying he has finally arrived and that he came to see his doll bride. He apologizes for leaving her alone, but then he suddenly sees Makoto holding a weapon and using it to kill Minori. In that moment, it becomes clear that they have been carrying out this process since the previous night. Turu screams, asking what he is doing and begging him not to kill his doll bride. He adds that if she dies, the potential results of the experiment conducted on her yesterday might be lost, referring to the pregnancy Haruto mentioned at the time. Suddenly, the siblings rise to their feet in front of him, leaving Turu in shock at their current state. The night before, they were in extreme weakness, but now they are entirely different. It becomes evident that when a fighter defeats a creature of equal or lower strength, they gain only limited experience. However, if the defeated creature is stronger than the fighter, their experience level increases significantly and rapidly. Since the siblings continued to kill each other repeatedly, each of them exceeded the other's level with every cycle, causing their levels to rise dramatically. The rapid increase in their strength caused their bodies and muscles to transform in a remarkably short time. As Turu began to process what he was witnessing, fear gripped him, and he stepped back, trying to leave the room, utterly unable to comprehend what had happened to these creatures. He continued retreating until he reached the stairs, muttering that something needed to be done immediately. Turning towards them, he stated that he didn't understand how they had broken free and taken on this form, but he warned them that escape was not an option. Backing away until he reached a switch labeled Danger, he quickly pressed it. At that moment, another door opened, revealing a massive beast standing beside it. Turu warned them that they had no chance of escaping and that he and the Chimera would kill them. It was then revealed that the seemingly gentle Chimera he had intended to feed was the very creature that had been tormenting Makoto and Minori. However, Makoto and Minori showed no fear. Instead, they decided it was time to take revenge for all they had suffered at the hands of these monsters. Makoto stepped forward, standing before the beast while Turu stood behind it, directing it toward Makoto and Minori in an attempt to intimidate them. Makoto reassured his sister, telling her not to worry and to step away from the Chimera, promising he would handle everything himself. Hearing this, Turu burst into loud laughter, mockingly asking if Makoto truly understood their situation to say such things. He added that Makoto was facing him alone while Chimera was by his side, meaning Makoto had no chance of winning. At that moment, Chimera grew even more enraged, prompting Turu to calm it down, assuring it that Makoto was nothing more than a meal and that he would provide it with plenty of good food. Turning to Makoto and Minori, he stated that they were merely food and it would be best for them to remain shackled silently, offering their experience points to increase their level. After that, he laughed and looked at Minori, suggesting they could enjoy themselves even more if she mated with the Chimera. Turu's curiosity deepened as he pondered what kind of offspring would result from the union between a Chimera and a member of the Immortal tribe. At that moment, Makoto placed a barrier between Minori and the others, glaring at Turu with intense rage and declaring that he would kill him. Turu only laughed hysterically again, challenging Makoto to try, adding that Makoto was nothing more than food to them. At that instant, Chimera's fury reached its peak, lunging toward Makoto with incredible speed and striking him down, revealing that its tail was, in fact, a massive serpent. Makoto was taken aback by Chimera's immense strength and astonishing speed, which he had not anticipated. Suddenly, hands wielding a knife appeared, stabbing into his body, an attack orchestrated by Turu, who was using the same ability he had previously employed to treat Saia and Chikara. However, he couldn't see Makoto clearly, so he was stabbing using a partial teleportation technique, warning him not to attempt an escape. It was then revealed that when a person's level increases, they may acquire unique skills that vary based on their combat role, experience, and origin. Since Turu was responsible for various tasks, he had gained multiple abilities, including elemental manipulation, pharmacology, monster training, and assassination. The ability he was currently using was the creation of portals between two separate locations, a skill useful for transferring objects and for assassinations, making it quite rare. Thanks to the combat prowess he gained from defeating the Demon King, Turu now possessed the strength to qualify for an S-rank guild. Makoto found himself trapped between Chimera on one side and Teru's invisible attacks on the other. Suddenly, Chimera's serpent-like tail coiled around Makoto's leg, hoisting him upside down, while at the same moment, Turu severed both of his arms. Chimera then attacked him with its enormous claws, dwarfing Makoto's body in size. Turu laughed again, taunting Makoto and asserting that no matter how high his level rose, he would always remain a weakling with mere regeneration abilities, nothing more than a food source to help them grow stronger and gain more experience. At that moment, Minori stood by, filled with fear for her brother as he faced both the monstrous Chimera and the deranged Turu. Chimera's rage peaked when Turu told Makoto that survival was now possible and commanded Chimera to devour him. The moment Turu gave the order, Chimera lunged at Makoto and began attacking him. However, after consuming part of Makoto's body, Turu noticed that Chimera appeared fatigued and soon stopped eating. Moments later, he was stunned to see Chimera collapsed on the ground, a green substance seeping from its mouth, its body lying motionless beside Makoto, who was drenched in a pool of blood. Turu rushed toward Chimera to check what had happened, only to be shocked when Makoto suddenly stood up again. He told Turu that he had been trying to avoid this outcome, but now there was no other choice. Turu then realized that Makoto had regenerated his limbs and the parts of his body that had been severed or consumed. Makoto informed Turu that he was the one who had killed Chimera. Overcome with fury and grief for his beloved beast, Turu lashed out in blind rage, repeatedly stabbing Makoto while screaming for him to die. However, Makoto calmly told him that if he lost too much blood, he would die. Turu froze in confusion at his words and noticed a wound on his hand coated in the same green substance he had seen dripping from Chimera's mouth before it died. Suddenly, he collapsed in front of Makoto, screaming in agony and crying out that his body was burning. At that moment, it became clear that as Makoto's level had risen, he had acquired a new skill, poison infliction. This ability transformed his body into a lethal toxin. He then informed Turu that his very blood had become the deadly poison now consuming him, but Turu refused to believe it, insisting that members of their tribe could not acquire additional abilities beyond regeneration without extensive training. Makoto, however, told him he had never needed training, reminding Turu that he had been poisoned by him hundreds of times before. He then grabbed Teru's own knife, made a cut on his hand, and let his blood drip onto Turu, telling him he was merely returning the poison that had once been inflicted on him. After that, he delivered a powerful kick, sending Turu flying across the room. Makoto approached Turu and stated that they had stolen the peaceful life he once had, and no one had ever stopped what they were doing to him despite his screams of pain. He added that he was not the only one who had suffered, his younger sister Minori had also been a victim. With that, he delivered a powerful punch to Teru's stomach. By this point, Turu was in a pitiful state, on the verge of death and pleading for help with his final breaths. However, in that moment, Makoto used his regeneration ability to heal Teru's wounds and keep him alive. Turu was stunned to realize that Makoto had saved him and asked why he had done it. Makoto simply replied that the reason should be obvious. He continued, stating that Teru's suffering and wounds had not yet satisfied him, the fire inside him was still burning. He added that he had always wondered how they felt when they sliced his body apart piece by piece with a knife, and that now he would let Turu experience the answer for himself. He intended to teach him the meaning of karma. The scene then shifts to Haruto and his team as they return to the guild building, joking sarcastically about what Turu might have done with his toy. Haruto then instructed Saia to go find Turu, as it was getting late and they had yet to celebrate their victory over the Demon King. Saia entered the building and called out for Turu, but upon arriving at the scene, he saw Chimera's lifeless body sprawled on the ground, blood splattered everywhere. He called for Turu again, asking what had happened, but received no response. Suddenly, something caught his eye, making him freeze in place, overcome with terror and disbelief. It was revealed that he saw Teru's mutilated, blood-drenched body hanging in the very cell where Makoto and Minori had once been imprisoned, with blood dripping beneath his feet. The scene shifts back to the past, revealing that Chikara was once an S-rank warrior specializing in martial arts, considered one of the strongest fighters in the Byakuren Guild. He was known for his intense passion, willing to risk his life and sacrifice himself for his comrades. However, those who knew him well were aware of his cunning nature, which was difficult to comprehend. He was admired by his peers, who aspired to attain his strength and possess a physique as powerful as his. However, they understood that no matter what they did, they could never reach his level or develop a body as formidable. At that time, Chikara overheard them discussing him and told them that his muscular build was the result of constant training, encouraging them to keep working hard. He then walked away, while they admired him, vowing to follow his advice. Chikara felt pleased knowing they looked up to him as a role model and often expressed their desire to become heroes like him. However, it is revealed that a year earlier, he had derived great pleasure from torturing Makoto and Minori, believing that any training yielding quick and tangible results was the most effective. For this reason, he continued to kill them with increasing brutality each time, convinced that this was the optimal way to train. He laughed mockingly while tormenting Minori, stating that gaining more strength by killing monsters like them, who could not even defend themselves, was absurdly easy. Thus, he persisted in executing them through savage methods to raise his level and further enhance his physical power. However, over time, Chikara grew frustrated that progressing from one level to the next was taking longer than before. He acknowledged this as a natural consequence of his increasing strength, but while torturing Makoto and repeatedly killing him, he became bored because Makoto was unable to resist, making the process less entertaining. Despite striking him violently and demanding a reaction to satisfy his ego, Makoto remained silent. This led Chikara to resort to even more brutal and merciless methods, desperate to hear the screams of both Makoto and his sister. Indeed, he escalated his cruelty, beating and executing them in the most gruesome ways imaginable. Feeling a twisted satisfaction, he began counting the ribs he had broken that day, reaching a total of 200 fractures in a single session. He then turned to Minori, ordering her to scream louder while he continued breaking her bones, demanding that her cries be pleasing for him to enjoy. As he intensified her torture, he mercilessly tore her body apart, forcing Minori to scream at the top of her lungs, which brought Chikara immense pleasure. He continued tormenting the siblings in each other's presence and, in the end, ordered them to put on a performance for him before he left. The scene then shifts back to the present, where Chikara is seen lifting weights, showing off his strength to his comrades. Suddenly, Saia rushes in to inform him that something terrible has happened. Chikara immediately stood up, and the group hurried together to the cell, where they were met with the gruesome sight of Turu hanging, his body covered in wounds and blood dripping from every inch. Haruto demanded to know where the siblings were, to which Saia replied he had no idea. When he arrived at the scene, neither of them was there. He then turned to Haruto and added that if their actions were exposed, it would lead to a global scandal. Meanwhile, Chikara began shouting, calling out to Turu and urging him to stay alive and not die. At that moment, his gaze fell upon Turu's laptop, which was still powered on. When he approached and looked at the screen, he discovered that everything that had happened to Turu had been recorded. Overwhelmed with emotion and seething with rage, he turned to the rest of the team, declaring that the siblings had subjected Turu to this horrific torture and that they had to seek revenge and kill them. However, in the next instant, the entire team was stunned when they saw Haruto draw his sword and point it at Turu. They all shouted for him to stop, but their shock deepened as they watched him strike, severing their comrade's neck in a single decisive blow, ending his life instantly. Chikara stepped toward Haruto, grabbing him and demanding an explanation for what he had just done, emphasizing that Turu now had no chance of being healed or returning to them. At that moment, Haruto told him that keeping Turu alive would have only meant prolonging his suffering. When Chikara attempted to argue, Saia supported Haruto's decision, explaining that Turu, in his current condition, had no chance of survival. The sorceress Saia then added sorrowfully that Turu had endured brutal torture and that even with magic, she would not have been able to save him. She then collapsed in grief, crying and screaming, vowing to kill Makoto and Minori in revenge. As for Haruto, after severing their comrade's head, he stood in a daze, silent and unresponsive, as Saia called his name multiple times. When he finally acknowledged Saia, he simply asked why he was calling, but Saia dismissed it, saying it was nothing, and fell silent. Haruto then addressed his team, stating that it was time to announce the death of hero Turu, who had protected the world. Saia asked if they should arrange a funeral first, but Haruto refused, insisting they would broadcast the news of his death immediately. The scene shifts to Makoto and Minori fleeing from the guild building, running through the forest in an attempt to remain hidden. Despite their strength and the levels they had reached, Minori was still weak from the prolonged period she had spent shackled and tortured, causing her to collapse and be unable to continue running. Makoto reassured her that she didn't need to push herself too hard and advised her to sit and rest for a while. They both sat down, overwhelmed with joy at finally escaping. Minori, overcome with emotion, said they had finally broken free from the hell they had endured for so long. She then began to cry as memories of their suffering resurfaced, prompting Makoto to comfort her, telling her it was all over now and that he would be able to protect her properly from this point forward. After a short while, exhaustion took over Minori, and she fell asleep, resting her head on her brother's lap. Makoto realized just how drained she was. However, he couldn't help but feel uneasy, uncertain of when those monsters would decide to come after them again or how they would track them down. Because of this, he knew he couldn't afford to sleep. He had to stay vigilant and keep watch, though exhaustion weighed heavily on him. Eventually, he succumbed to sleep, but after a short while, he was jolted awake by strange movements around them. Opening his eyes, he saw figures moving nearby. He quickly got up, trying to determine whether a threat was approaching. Stepping forward cautiously for a clearer view, a strong, sinister energy filled the air, making him decide to leave Minori sleeping where she was, as it would be safer for her while he investigated the situation. Moving swiftly and cautiously, he headed toward the source of the ominous energy. From a high branch in one of the trees, he spotted a particular location that seemed to be the origin of the malevolent aura. He knew the chances of being detected were high, but before he could react, he was suddenly ambushed from behind by one of the figures he had seen earlier, who drove a knife into his neck. Makoto fell from the tree due to the force of the stab and found himself surrounded by a group of fighters, their aggressive demeanor evident as they began closing in on him. At that moment, Makoto asked them who they were, but no one answered. One of them said, "This is the man we're looking for," another added, "The woman they mentioned isn't with him, but capturing him alone is worth 500 million. That's more than enough." The sorceress among them then stated they needed to finish the job quickly before casting a spell to enhance the strength of all the men with her. As her magic spread, the entire group received a power boost, fueling their aggression as they prepared to attack Makoto. One of them, wielding an enormous club, stepped forward and delivered a powerful blow to Makoto's head, then continued striking him repeatedly to ensure his death. However, they were all left in shock when Makoto began to move again, still alive despite the brutal beating he had just endured. Their disbelief was evident, particularly on the sorceress's face, as she had been certain he had perished. After the devastating blows he had endured, Makoto stood up once more, firmly planting his feet on the ground. He glanced at those surrounding him and asked whether they were working for the Byakuran Guild members. When no one responded, he declared that their identities didn't matter to him. Suddenly, he caught the large man who had struck him off guard, landing a powerful blow that sent him crashing to the ground. Standing amid the stunned expressions of the rest of the group, he declared in a resolute voice that anyone harboring ill intentions toward him was his enemy. At that moment, two attackers charged at him simultaneously, and one managed to sever his arm with a sword. Pausing afterward to laugh and boast about his achievement, he was taken aback when Makoto immediately grabbed his severed arm. In a shocking display of strength, Makoto used it as a weapon to strike one of his assailants with devastating force, leaving everyone in utter disbelief. He then launched a relentless assault, taking down each of his opponents one by one until all of them lay on the ground. Only the sorceress remained standing. Turning to her, Makoto remarked that she was the last one left. Unwilling to give up easily, the sorceress resorted to using her purple light magic, summoning a powerful bolt of lightning and hurling it toward Makoto. Feeling a surge of pride and satisfaction, she proclaimed that no matter how fast he was, he would never evade her attack. However, when she saw him rise again as if nothing had happened, fear took hold of her. She asked him who he really was, unable to comprehend what was unfolding before her. Attempting to strike him again with another bolt of equal power, Makoto did not back down. He charged at her furiously, realizing he was closing in. She tried to flee, but Makoto told her that he would not let her escape. Some time later, Makoto was seen having tied up all his opponents, hanging them from tree branches. He then took some of their clothing, including the sorceress's attire, feeling pleased when he found clothes that fit him perfectly. Before leaving, he looked at the captives and told them that he had spared their lives, advising them not to cross his path again. He returned to his sister, who was still asleep but stirred upon sensing his presence. He apologized for waking her, but she reassured him that there was no need to apologize, saying she was fine. Then she asked where he had gotten the clothes he was wearing. Not wanting to scare her or reveal the truth, Makoto simply said that some kind people had given him the clothes. Minori believed him and felt happy for him, but her joy grew even more when he told her he had brought her some clothes as well. After receiving the clothes, Minori stood at a distance to change while Makoto turned away to give her privacy. He then informed her that as soon as she was ready, they needed to leave. With that, Makoto and Minori resumed their journey, carrying the weapons and supplies they had taken from their attackers. They walked for a long distance, and Makoto thought to himself that the farther they got from their enemies, the better their chances of survival. Eventually, they reached a waterfall, and by then, exhaustion had caught up with them both. Makoto suggested they take a short break there. They sat near the waterfall and lit a fire to keep warm. Makoto then opened the bag he had taken and found some food inside. Minori's eyes lit up with delight when she spotted some sweets. Makoto handed them to her, and she happily thanked him as they ate together. While they enjoyed their meal, Makoto reviewed the items he had obtained from their attackers, some weapons and emergency tools, but found no useful information among them. Because of this, he told Minori that he would need to return to the city to gather information that might help them. He prepared to leave, explaining that he also needed to find more food to last them for a while. Before parting, he instructed Minori to stay well hidden, and she assured him that she would do as he asked. The scene then transitions to Makoto arriving in the city, where he was captivated by everything around him. He made his way to the market, where he sold some of the equipment he had acquired and was pleasantly surprised to find that its value was far higher than he had expected. Afterward, he entered a shop to purchase what he needed, feeling relieved that he now had enough money to properly feed his sister. Once he finished shopping, he sat on the street, contemplating his next move. His thoughts drifted toward the members of the guild, and he realized that Taro had merely been a tool in their hands while the real monsters were the others. If he wanted to take revenge on them and make them suffer as he and his sister had, he first needed to uncover each of their weaknesses. Suddenly, as Makoto sat deep in thought, he spotted a blimp soaring over the city, broadcasting a live transmission of Haruto and his team. He listened as they announced Taro's death, describing him as an important comrade and wise supporter who had died after enduring brutal torture. They displayed an image of Taro, vowing they would not rest until those responsible for his murder were brought to justice. When the public learned that Taro had been tortured and killed, a wave of outrage spread, as he had been beloved by many. Haruto then revealed images of Makoto and Minori, declaring them to be the criminals who had murdered Taro, with their names written beneath each picture. At that moment, Makoto realized that the people who had attacked him in the forest had indeed been working under Haruto and his team. Haruto then directed a message straight at him, asking if he was watching, making it clear to Makoto that he would never be able to escape, no matter where he ran, and that he would be punished for what he had done. The crowd erupted into cheers for Haruto, demanding vengeance for their fallen hero. There sat Makoto among them, silently witnessing everything unfold. Through Haruto's actions, Makoto understood that he was merely trying to cover up his and his team's crimes, using this elaborate deception to manipulate the public. Anger surged through Makoto as he watched, vowing that he would expose Haruto's true nature and utterly destroy him. 6 days had passed since Makoto and Minori had disappeared, leaving Haruto and his team in deep distress. In the scene, a man was tied up as Chikara savagely beat him, punishing him for failing to provide any useful information about the siblings' whereabouts, having been hired to track them down. The sorceress Saia then stood up, noting that their team's levels had significantly increased, suggesting that mercenaries like him might soon be unnecessary. Meanwhile, Shia sat anxiously, his growing concern evident as he feared their actions would eventually come to light, leading to their downfall. Haruto reassured him, saying there was no need for worry. He explained that they had already taken steps to prevent a scandal by placing all the blame on the siblings and accusing them of killing Taro. They had also set a 500 million bounty on their heads, ensuring that no one would believe their claims, as the siblings were now seen as criminals. Chikara, however, snapped back, asking if she suggested they abandon the hunt for the siblings after what they had done to Taro. She quickly clarified that was not her intention, but Chikara's anger intensified as he declared he would never forgive them for torturing their comrade. It then became clear that several other individuals were bound and present in the room. Chikara's rage overflowed into tears as he vowed not to rest until he captured the siblings again and made them suffer a fate worse than anything they had previously endured. Aya tried to calm him, explaining that Taro had been the weakest among them, which was why he had been targeted. However, Chikara became even angrier, demanding she not speak ill of Taro. In response, Aya used her magic to bind him in chains, instructing him to calm down. She asserted that she did not believe the siblings posed any real threat. Chikara vehemently disagreed, shouting that it wasn't about whether they were a threat but what they had done to Taro. At that moment, Haruto intervened, attempting to defuse the situation and ordering them to stop bickering. He pointed out that the message written in blood on the cell walls clearly stated, "I will kill you all," meaning every one of them was now a target. Despite this, he reassured them that there was no reason to worry because the siblings would eventually reveal themselves to achieve their goals. He added that the whole world now supported them, and after circulating the siblings' images and issuing a massive bounty, any news about them would reach them immediately if anyone spotted them. Chikara reluctantly agreed, admitting that Haruto's points were valid. But before he could elaborate, Haruto cut him off, emphasizing that worrying and fearing the worst would not help them. He reminded them that they were the world's heroes and their priority should now be preparing to defeat another demon king. He concluded by saying it would be best for everyone to calm down and end the discussion, as they were all exhausted from recent events. He insisted they should rest for now and resume their work later. Nonetheless, Chikara remained restless, consumed by his relentless desire for revenge against Makoto and Minori. The scene shifts to Makoto and Minori, who are still near the waterfall. As they wake up, Makoto asks Minori if she slept well. She laughs, saying she had a wonderful sleep, thanks to the illusion spell, which she finds fascinating, adding that she was able to rest without any nightmares. Makoto responds that it's great to hear and that since they've rested well, they need to leave. Staying in one place for too long could lead to their capture. Minori points out that they are now wanted criminals and that getting caught would be serious. However, Makoto cuts her off, telling her not to worry. He then pulls a mask from his bag, explaining that wearing these will help conceal their faces while still allowing for clear vision. Both of them put on the masks, and Minori comments on their usefulness, noting that this way, no one will recognize them even if surrounded by enemies. Makoto stands up and says they should get moving, but Minori asks if they have a specific destination in mind. Makoto confirms that they do, the dungeon. It's revealed that the dungeon is a separate world hidden behind a portal, distinct from the real world, where its laws do not apply. Additionally, ordinary people are not permitted to enter, as the dungeon is known for its treacherous terrain, making it an ideal hiding place. Once they arrive at their intended location inside the dungeon, Makoto states that, according to the dungeon guide, the poison swamp is at the highest peak of the mountain before them. This place is notorious for its extreme danger, which is why hunters rarely enter. For that reason, Makoto believes it will serve as a suitable base for them. They climb the stairs leading to the portal that separates the real world from the dungeon. Makoto reassures Minori, promising that no matter what happens, he will always be by her side. He takes her hand, and together they step through the portal. They cross safely, and Minori is mesmerized by the eerie beauty of the place. However, Makoto quickly informs her that everything around them is laced with deadly toxins. He further explains that they are the only ones who can safely enter this area and reminds her to remain constantly vigilant. He also points out that while hunters rarely venture here, those with magical immunity to poison could easily track them down. As Makoto begins preparing their base, he steps onto the grass beneath his feet. The moment he does, a closed flower blooms, releasing toxic seeds toward his face. He swiftly warns Minori and explains what just happened. She agrees with his assessment and emphasizes the need to be extremely careful. Suddenly, a look of fear spreads across Minori's face as she spots something terrifying. She gestures for Makoto to look in that direction. When Makoto turns to see what she is pointing at, he is shocked to find massive monsters standing before them. He quickly tells Minori not to worry and assures her he will handle the creatures himself. However, at that moment, one of the monsters lets out a thunderous roar and appears ready to attack. Makoto swiftly strikes first, keeping the monster away from his sister. He successfully defeats the first creature and stands beside Minori, reassuring her that he can handle the threats now that he has taken one down. However, in that instant, a second monster ambushes him and swallows him whole in a single gulp. Minori is left in utter shock as she watches half of her brother's body disappear, with only the remaining half standing before her. Moments later, Makoto's body began to reconstruct itself, returning to its normal state. He attempted to counterattack the monster that had swallowed him but quickly realized that the dungeon creatures possessed a level of strength and speed unlike anything he had faced before. After several failed attempts, he paused, recognizing that this monster was completely different and far more powerful than anything he had encountered, whether against Taro or in his beast form. At that moment, Minori began using her magical abilities to protect her older brother from the creature. Following this, Makoto felt a surge of strength within him, wondering if Minori's magic had somehow enhanced his body. To his astonishment, he noticed his severed hand, which had fallen to the ground, moving on its own. Staring in shock, he sensed a strange feeling in his hands and feet. To confirm his suspicion, he stood before the monster and commanded his hand to move. To his disbelief, the severed hand crawled toward the monster's mouth, prying it open wide without any physical effort from Makoto. Seizing the moment, Makoto gathered all his strength and delivered a devastating blow inside the creature's open mouth. He succeeded in defeating it, but as he stood there, exhausted, Minori asked if he was all right. Gasping for breath, Makoto reassured her that he was fine, though a bit drained. However, his mind remained focused on his severed hand, trying to comprehend what had just happened. He soon realized this was a new ability, likely acquired due to Minori's enhancement magic, and he concluded that this newfound power would be incredibly useful for both of them. We then transition to a new scene, a month after Makoto and Minori escaped from the Byakuran Guild. A group of warriors is seen battling massive beasts surrounding them, when Chikara appears, carrying an enormous boulder. As he advances toward the monsters, he hurls the massive stone at one of the flying creatures, striking it directly and sending it crashing to the ground. He then charges at another monster, gripping its wing with immense force and successfully taking it down, causing his level to increase instantly. The warriors accompanying him watch in awe, with one commenting that such strength is expected from Chikara, who can vanquish these monsters effortlessly. Another admits they could never pull off such a feat later. They light a fire and sit down to eat together, but Chikara seems lost in thought, preoccupied with the whereabouts of the two siblings who vanished. One of the warriors reassures him, saying there's no need to rush, as rumors suggest that every hunter is searching for them due to the bounty on their heads, meaning they will inevitably be found. Another warrior shifts the conversation to something even more intriguing, mentioning that he heard from a friend about a masked man performing astonishing feats and possessing immense power. He continues, saying that just a day ago, his friend was on his way to the poison swamp area to clear out monsters when he spotted this mysterious figure. According to him, the masked man had taken down the poison swamp serpent with nothing but his bare hands, without using any tools or weapons. Chikara reacts, stating that the poison swamp serpent is classified as an A-rank beast, with venom so deadly it could kill a mountain elephant. His comrade responds, affirming that he couldn't imagine anyone other than Chikara himself being capable of defeating such a lethal creature. However, Chikara replies that the world is vast, and it isn't surprising that other powerful warriors exist, ones they have yet to hear about. He declares that if someone truly managed to kill that serpent with their bare hands, he would certainly want to meet them. Curious, he asks when this event took place, and his comrade informs him it happened 3 days ago. Chikara speculates that this person might still be in the area, but his companion expresses concern, warning that the poison swamp is extremely toxic and dangerous. Before he can finish his sentence, Chikara suddenly lands a powerful punch straight to his face. He then grabs him by the collar, declaring that they are heading to the poison swamp immediately, ordering everyone to prepare for departure. Excitement gleams in his eyes as he adds that this is going to be thrilling. We then shift to a new scene, returning to the poison swamp, where Makoto and Minori are present. Suddenly, Makoto senses something happening around them. Minori turns to him and asks what is going on, but he does not respond. Instead, he swiftly leaps onto the nearest tree to see who has arrived at the swamp, sensing an unsettling presence in the area. The energy feels familiar, one he knows all too well. He quickly realizes the newcomer is Chikara. Makoto descends from the tree and informs Minori that he is going to confront him, but she, feeling afraid, pleads with him to stay with her. As always, Makoto reassures her, telling her not to be scared or worried, reminding her that their strength has grown significantly since before. He adds that this is their chance to take revenge on him. Still anxious, Minori hesitates, prompting Makoto to remind her of his greatest advantage: he cannot die. She then urges him to be careful, warning him that Chikara is nothing like Taro. He is on a completely different level. Before he leaves, Minori casts an enhancement spell to further strengthen him. As soon as she finishes, Makoto swiftly moves toward Chikara. Upon reaching the gate, he hides behind a large tree to avoid being seen but suddenly notices that his vision has become much sharper. He spots Chikara stepping through the entrance of the poison swamp and realizes he is now very close, meaning he can escape easily if needed. Makoto continues to observe, hoping Chikara will venture deeper into the swamp away from the entrance. Just then, he spots a boar nearby and considers incorporating it into his plan. Next, we see Makoto cutting his finger with a knife, using his blood as part of his strategy. He approaches the boar and presses his bleeding finger against its body. At this point, we understand that he is employing a hypnosis ability, one that allows him to induce short-term hallucinations in his target by absorbing a small part of its body. He successfully takes control of the boar, making it run forward, prompting several other boars to follow. Soon, a herd of boars rushes toward Chikara and his group. The warriors accompanying Chikara appear startled, but he scoffs at them, calling them trembling cowards. He then declares that the boars are merely a warm-up. The fighters begin attacking and fending off the boars, but Chikara criticizes their performance, deeming them too weak and seeking a greater challenge. After a short while, they manage to eliminate the boars. At that moment, Chikara tells his men that they will move further inside. One of them requests a brief rest, which enrages Chikara, who dismisses the idea as nonsense. The warrior attempts to explain his fatigue, but suddenly he begins bleeding from his eyes and gasping for breath. Soon, they all realize that every fighter in Chikara's group is experiencing the same symptoms, an intense exhaustion overtaking them for no apparent reason. Chikara is shocked to see his men in such a state and demands to know what has happened to them. At that moment, he catches a strange scent lingering in the air and instantly recognizes it as a deadly poison. However, he questions this, as the poisoned swamp boars do not emit such a scent, even after death. While he tries to determine the source of the poison, Makoto approaches from behind. The moment Chikara senses him, he delivers a sudden and powerful strike, sending Makoto flying backward. Chikara then notices the mask covering Makoto's face and realizes he is the mysterious figure from the rumors. At that moment, Makoto lunges at him with his knife, landing a swift strike that stabs the blade into Chikara's hand with incredible speed. However, he is caught off guard when Chikara grips his injured hand with his uninjured one and delivers a brutal punch to Makoto. This attack, however, gives Makoto the chance to distance himself again. Makoto is surprised by Chikara's reaction. Rather than being angered, Chikara comments on Makoto's attack with admiration, stating that the rumors about him are indeed true. He is a remarkably strong fighter. Despite Makoto's frustration and relentless attacks, he finds Chikara smiling at him, expressing genuine admiration. Makoto stands in shock at how Chikara is handling both him and the situation. Chikara continues, stating that he admires strong individuals and utterly despises the weak. He gestures toward his fallen comrades on the ground, remarking that they died simply because they were weak. He goes on to say that he can sense Makoto's immense strength, which is why he is offering him a chance to join him. He proposes that Makoto become part of the Byakuran Guild, enticing him with promises of wealth, honor, and even women. Chikara assures him that if he accepts, he will have everything he could ever desire. Then Chikara asks for Makoto's thoughts, emphasizing that this is an offer too good to refuse. However, Makoto remains silent, perplexed by Chikara's words and demeanor. Chikara steps forward, placing his foot atop the corpse of one of his recently deceased comrades, reiterating his belief that he loves the strong but despises the weak. He then kicks the body away, commenting that he once thought they were strong enough, but it turns out he was mistaken. The mere sight of them now irritates him. Makoto listens as Chikara continues, stating that had he known this about them earlier, he would have simply used them as punching bags. At that moment, memories of Chikara's past brutality resurface in Makoto's mind as he watches Chikara keep kicking his fallen comrades. Finally, Makoto asks him why he enjoys tormenting the weak this way. Chikara responds casually, as if it were the most natural thing in the world, saying that it is fun and entertaining. Confused, Makoto presses him for clarification, to which Chikara replies that all weaklings behave the same way when he beats them. He bursts into laughter, explaining how they all beg for mercy and plead with him to spare them. Mockingly, he describes their faces wrinkling in terror, filled with utter despair in their final moments, which only makes it more enjoyable for him. After hearing this, Makoto's rage reaches its peak, and he lunges forward to attack, determined to take his revenge. However, Chikara effortlessly evades the strike and grabs Makoto's arm, commenting that it was a good attack. He agrees that men should fight each other first, then clarifies that he views this as a test of strength between them. In return, he delivers a powerful punch to Makoto, but Makoto skillfully dodges it, seizing the opportunity to draw his knife and swiftly stab Chikara's arm. Chikara retreats quickly but remarks that he never intended to let Makoto escape anyway, acknowledging that he is indeed strong. At that moment, Makoto realizes that Chikara was never going to let him go easily because, in essence, he is a monster. Suddenly, Chikara charges at Makoto once more, unleashing his crushing devastation strike. The impact is devastating, sending Makoto flying backward at tremendous speed, covering a great distance before crashing into a massive tree. As he sits against the tree, he reflects on how this is the most powerful strike he has ever endured. A thought crosses his mind. Perhaps Chikara wasn't even using his full strength when he attacked him and his sister back when they were imprisoned. Moments later, he sees Chikara approaching him, astonished, asking how he managed to withstand such a blow. Chikara then admits that he expected this, revealing that he had only used 30% of his full power. Now, Makoto realizes that this incredible strike, the strongest he has ever encountered, was not even close to Chikara's full potential. To make matters worse, when Chikara notices the knife still in Makoto's grasp, he extends his hand forward, telling him he can use it however he pleases. He adds that he will accept any attack Makoto throws at him, ready to prove who is truly stronger. Makoto quickly gets up and lunges forward, aiming a direct stab at Chikara's abdomen. However, the knife doesn't even leave a scratch on Chikara's body. He sneers, remarking that Makoto must not have sharpened his knife, as a blade that dull and worn out couldn't possibly inflict any damage, no matter how much strength he used. Chikara adds that Makoto's inability to inflict even the slightest injury only proves the vast difference in power between them. He will never be able to defeat him. Frustrated, Makoto shouts at Chikara to be quiet and lunges forward, attempting to stab him multiple times, yet failing each time. Chikara then remarks that Makoto is the first person to challenge him with such persistence, despite knowing his power. He admits his admiration for Makoto grows with every moment, before delivering a powerful kick that sends Makoto flying into a pool of toxic sludge. Chikara sighs, feeling frustrated that his excitement got the better of him, especially as he sees Makoto sinking into the poison. Convinced that Makoto is dead, he turns away, declaring it's over and that he had expected more from him. Suddenly, he is taken aback as a knife buries itself in his shoulder while he walks away. He quickly pulls it out, feeling uneasy, realizing that the blade has been poisoned after Makoto's plunge into the toxic swamp. What shocks him even more is the sight of Makoto rising again from the sludge. He mutters in disbelief. Despite the force with which he had broken Makoto's body, he stands once more, and his skin hasn't even corroded from being submerged in the poison. Chikara exclaims in astonishment that Makoto is no ordinary human. A sudden realization strikes him. Could it be that he is? This thought enrages him, and he roars in denial, declaring it impossible. Chikara charges at Makoto, launching a relentless barrage of attacks, but Makoto skillfully evades them, retreating backward. Frustrated by his inability to land a hit, Chikara slams the ground with immense force. The sheer power of his strike causes a massive explosion that shakes the entire area. As the dust settles, the surroundings are revealed to be utterly destroyed, while Chikara stands unscathed in the middle of the wreckage. He soon notices Makoto's mask lying on the ground, having fallen off due to the explosion. Chikara bursts into hysterical laughter, addressing Makoto and declaring that it's finally confirmed, it really is him. He has finally found him. Looking at Makoto, who stands before him seething with rage, he affirms that he has been searching for him all this time. Laughing again, he expresses disbelief that the masked man was Makoto all along. Chikara clarifies that the reason Makoto has been able to withstand his attacks isn't due to raw strength but because of his body's regeneration ability. His tone shifts to one of anger as he tells Makoto that he has been hunting him down all this time because he is responsible for Taro's death, and he has been dreaming of the day he would exact his revenge. Chikara declares there will be no more talk of Makoto joining him or becoming his ally, as he had suggested when they first met. His eyes burn with hatred as he glares at Makoto, stating with finality that he will kill him. Yet, Makoto remains standing, unwavering and unaffected by Chikara's words. He then asks if killing him is truly the only thing that will bring him satisfaction and peace. Challengingly, Makoto tells Chikara that what he is about to do will go far beyond mere death. The two stand face to face, eyes locked in defiance, each certain he will emerge victorious. Chikara then launches his attack, surging forward with the intent to end Makoto completely. At that moment, Makoto remains unmoving, making incisions on his own hands. As Chikara reaches him, he leaps high into the air before landing in front of Makoto, shouting that he will not allow him to escape. Due to Chikara's sheer speed and power, the impact between them is devastating, resembling yet another explosion. However, when Chikara looks ahead, he finds that Makoto is no longer in the spot where he had stood. Instead, he sees him dashing toward him from a distance. Makoto accelerates at incredible speed, leaping high into the air before diving toward Chikara, aiming a punch directly at his face with all his might. To Chikara, though, the attack is hardly worth noting. He laughs and asks if that is truly the best Makoto can do. Without hesitation, he counters with a devastating punch to Makoto's face, asserting that this is what a real strike looks like. After landing the powerful blow, Chikara glares at Makoto, emphasizing that this is what true strength feels like. Makoto finds himself in a dire state, prompting Chikara to glance at him questioningly before asking why his body is trembling. Chikara bursts into laughter, affirming that Makoto is indeed shaking and that his fear must be deeply ingrained within him. Makoto attempts to move, but Chikara continues to mock him, stating that fear is not something that easily fades away. He then asks whether Makoto still remembers the terror he felt during his torture in the interrogation chamber. In that moment, it becomes apparent that Makoto's severed hand is positioned behind Chikara, and he has been fixated on its location the entire time. He decides to move it, and as soon as he does, his hand begins crawling along the ground until it reaches behind Chikara and latches onto the arm he was about to strike him with. Enraged, Chikara tries to shake it off, exclaiming that he knew there had to be a trick behind this move. He steps closer to Makoto, challenging him and asking if he truly believes he can defeat him with such a petty maneuver. With that, he lands a powerful kick to Makoto's stomach, laughing once more as he states that he has a question for him. He asks how Makoto managed to grow this strong in such a short period. When Makoto does not respond, Chikara informs him that since he refuses to answer, he will continue beating him until he does. He then kicks him in the head before stepping on it, adding that since Makoto is here, his sister must not be far away either. At this moment, Makoto recalls all the torment his sister endured at Chikara's hands. While Chikara continues speaking, stating that once he is done playing with Makoto, he will go searching for her, the mention of his sister combined with painful memories flooding his mind causes Makoto's rage to surge uncontrollably. However, Chikara shows no mercy and continues to strike him while he lies beneath his feet, then considers restraining him before he has the chance to reconstruct his body again. He begins scanning the area for something to bind Makoto with, but when he looks back, he finds that Makoto is no longer there. In that instant, Makoto appears behind Chikara without him noticing, having completely rebuilt his body. Chikara realizes that Makoto's body reconstruction ability has become significantly faster than during their previous encounter. As he processes the extent of Makoto's improvement, he is taken aback when Makoto vanishes before his eyes. The moment he comprehends what has happened, Makoto reappears at his side and lunges at him with full force, attempting to deliver a decisive strike. However, Chikara's physical strength far surpasses Makoto's, allowing him to counter the attack and knock Makoto down with a brutal blow. He tells Makoto that while he has indeed become faster, his speed is meaningless against Chikara's overwhelming strength. Chikara charges at Makoto and severs both of his arms, taunting him by questioning whether his body reconstruction ability will fail him this time and wondering how much longer he can maintain such a pathetic defense. Makoto is then seen lying on the ground, both arms missing. Chikara sneers at him, declaring that all he does is rebuild his body and defend himself mindlessly, admitting he never expected him to be this foolish. However, he notices Makoto sitting there with a smile, prompting him to ask in confusion what is so amusing. At that moment, Makoto surprises him by stating that he had been thinking the same thing, relieved to know that Chikara is nothing more than a fool lacking intelligence. Suddenly, all the severed arms from Makoto's body begin gathering around Chikara, and Makoto commands them to move. Caught off guard, Chikara scoffs, asking if Makoto truly believes an attack like this could affect him. However, he soon realizes the arms are striking him with tremendous force, and he is unable to shake them off. In shock, he cries out, questioning the source of this power and how someone who was trembling before him moments ago has reached such strength. Makoto responds, telling Chikara that while fear is indeed carved into his being, it has grown until it transformed into pure hatred toward him. At that moment, Makoto is completely consumed by rage and hatred, granting him power beyond his usual limits. He lands a devastating blow on Chikara, managing to sever Chikara's arm, causing him to scream in pain and shock. Standing before him with unwavering confidence, Makoto declares that they are now engaged in a contest of strength. Overwhelmed by agony and fury, Chikara yells at Makoto, vowing to beat him until he is nothing more than a punching bag. Raising his voice, he warns Makoto not to become conceited and think he has become something noteworthy. He then charges at Makoto in a frenzy, determined to crush him and tear him into tiny pieces so that he will never be able to rebuild his body again. In response, Makoto commands all of his severed arms to converge, fusing them together into an enormous limb. Using this colossal arm, he delivers a powerful strike to Chikara's remaining hand, eliciting another agonized scream. It soon becomes clear that Chikara's second hand has also been severed, prompting Makoto to ask him how he feels now and what it is like to have lost in this contest of strength. He continues questioning whether Chikara feels pain or hatred, telling him that the fear they all endured while imprisoned and tortured will now be carved into his own body. The scene shifts to a new setting where a week has passed since the battle. Haruto asks Saia about their preparations for the upcoming fight to eliminate the second Demon King. Saia responds that they are close to finishing their preparations and that they have been pushing themselves harder in memory of Taro. Suddenly, Haruto asks who Taro is, prompting Saia to be stunned by his words. Saia asks how he could say such a thing. Haruto stands still for a moment, contemplating the name before repeating it and stating that he remembers. He then laughs, telling Saia that he was only joking. However, Saia warns him never to joke about such matters again, saying it's not funny, even as a prank. Haruto apologizes, and they continue on their way. Later, Saia mentions to Haruto that he has not seen Chikara in a while. Haruto replies that Chikara is likely out searching for the Immortal brothers, adding that Chikara always considered them good punching bags. Saia agrees, affirming the truth of his words. Haruto reassures him not to worry, stating that Chikara will certainly find a way to reclaim the two of them. Saia acknowledges this possibility but expresses his belief that they are the cause of Chikara's suffering, declaring that when they return, he will kill them. At that moment, a man comes running toward them, calling out to them. Saia asks what happened to make him run like that. The man responds that a package has arrived for them, stressing with great emotion that it is no ordinary package. Growing more bewildered, Saia and Haruto quickly follow him to see its contents. When they arrive, Saia asks Aya what happened. She responds with a question of her own, surprised by his inquiry, before pointing to the box and telling them that this is what happened. As Saia looks inside, he finds Chikara's hands along with one of his eyes, trembling in shock. He gasps and exclaims, "This tattoo!" Everyone quickly realizes that the hands indeed belong to Chikara. Later, the three of them gather alone, still in complete shock with the box containing Chikara's severed arms before them. Aya casts a magical spell to determine whether the arms are real or an illusion. When the spell concludes, she confirms that they are not fake, they truly belong to Chikara. This revelation ignites Saia's fury. He remarks that given Chikara's known strength, it would be extremely difficult for anyone to defeat him, wondering who could have done this to him. Haruto responds that whoever did it did not merely cut off Chikara's arms, they deliberately sent them to them, which means they hold an immense grudge. He adds that since Chikara was searching for the Immortal brothers, they should consider the possibility that they were responsible. However, Saia rejects this idea, insisting that those two could never defeat Chikara. Haruto replies that he has had his doubts ever since they managed to take down Taro. He further explains that although Taro may have been the weakest fighter among their team, he was still stronger than most mid-level hunters. Yet, Taro was defeated, and now Chikara, one of the strongest warriors in the world, has also been eliminated. Both of them have become stronger than they were before. Saia objects, saying that even if this is true, it is impossible for them to have grown powerful enough to kill Chikara in such a short time. Haruto then asks how their own team became so strong. Saia responds that they already know the reason, adding that they kept killing the sisters, which allowed their levels to keep increasing each time. At that moment, he realizes why Haruto asked him that question and expresses his disbelief, saying it is impossible. Haruto continues explaining that their levels increase when they defeat high-ranking opponents because they gain additional experience points. He asserts that they likely killed each other repeatedly, wanting to level up as fast as possible. Saia considers Haruto's words and recalls what happened to Taro and Chikara, realizing that this explanation actually makes sense. Haruto elaborates further, explaining to Saia and Aya that the sisters kept raising their levels until they reached a point where they could seek revenge against them. Saia grows increasingly tense and refuses to believe it, prompting Aya to intervene in an attempt to calm him down. She expresses her sorrow over what happened to Chikara but insists they must focus on their next steps. Aya then moves behind Saia and tells him that she has cast a spell to soothe his mind so he can relax. As she begins to activate the enchantment, Saia thanks her and stands up, telling them he will go ahead with his decision before leaving the room. After his departure, Haruto apologizes to Aya and asks her to leave him alone for a while. Understanding his request, she complies. Once she is gone, Haruto approaches the box and opens it, staring at Chikara's severed hand with disgust. He scoffs, wondering sarcastically if the sisters truly believe they can frighten them with something like this. He lifts the box and remarks that sending such trash to intimidate them is nothing but an illusion, before dumping its contents into the garbage. He admits that their ability to defeat Chikara is impressive but calls them foolish. Then he notices the eye that had been inside the box, now lying on the ground. Without hesitation, he crushes it underfoot. It is then revealed that this eye was not Chikara's, it was Makoto's, which he had been using to spy on the guild and observe their reactions. Makoto is seen standing on top of a building, watching the guild's base through his enchanted eye. However, he realizes he must return to Minori, as he is worried about her. He reflects on how sending the package was just a convenient excuse to come to the city and purchase supplies for them. Despite his immunity to poisons, the food in the swamp is hardly ideal. Afterward, he goes shopping, noting that his clothes have been enchanted to automatically repair themselves if they get torn or damaged. He also buys some beautiful dolls to give to Minori to cheer her up, especially since he has left her alone for so long. Makoto is seen moving through the city from rooftop to rooftop, avoiding detection by any hunters. However, while doing so, he notices a group of them on the streets below. He quickly realizes they are chasing someone who appears to be a young girl, and he recognizes that this street falls under the control of the Bakuran Guild. Initially, he considers staying out of the matter, but as he watches the hunters close in on the girl, about to capture her, he cannot ignore the situation any longer. The hunters taunt her, saying she has nowhere left to run. Suddenly, Makoto drops down from above, declaring that he despises bullies. One of the hunters demands to know who he is, but Makoto does not respond. He simply launches an attack, knocking the hunter to the ground. He then turns to the girl, telling her that there must be a reason why they are after her, so she should run while she has the chance. However, the girl does not respond or make any move to escape. Curious, he steps closer to see her face, and the moment he recognizes her, he asks in astonishment what she is doing here. The scene transitions back to the toxic swamp, where Minori anxiously awaits her brother, who is significantly late. When she finally sees him approaching, relief floods over her, but it quickly turns to fear as she notices he is carrying someone on his back. Disturbed, she asks who this person is and what has occurred. Makoto reassures her, telling her not to worry. He then urges her to take a closer look at the face of the girl he's carrying, which triggers the same shock in Minori that Makoto felt earlier. To her disbelief, she realizes the girl is an exact replica of herself, leaving her stunned as she exclaims that this girl is none other than Minori herself. The narrative transitions to introduce Saia, the third member of the Byakuren Guild. He stands out as the esteemed leader of the White Lotus Guild, recognized among the elite S-class warriors for his remarkable swordsmanship. His striking appearance and amiable personality have made him particularly popular with the women in the city. While he brings joy to the White Lotus Guild, only his closest associates are aware of his dark and sadistic nature. Beneath his charming exterior lies a twisted personality. He takes pleasure in tormenting young women and often tells Minori that she is his favorite target. Unlike the others, Minori has survived his brutal torture, which only amplifies his delight as he revels in her screams. This torment unfolds before Makoto, who is heartbroken over his sister's suffering and eventually confronts Saia, asking why he doesn't torture him instead. In response, Saia silences Makoto with a strike of his sword, explaining that inflicting pain on men offers him no satisfaction. His true pleasure comes from tormenting women. He then resumes torturing Minori, demanding louder screams while Makoto helplessly cries out in despair. The scene shifts again to Saia, who hums cheerfully as he walks through the halls of the Byakuren Guild. He soon spots Haruto and Taro heading toward a restricted area, piquing his curiosity. Saia secretly follows them to discover what lies within. Just as Taro is about to investigate, Haruto senses Saia's presence and confronts him, reminding him that spying is inappropriate. Saia brushes it off with a laugh, apologizing and explaining that he was simply intrigued. Haruto, unbothered by Saia's presence, decides to show him the contents of the room, stating they plan to dispose of them anyway. Upon entering, Saia is taken aback by the sight of numerous large tubes containing human bodies. Taro reveals these are cloned replicas of Minori, created at Haruto's request. Saia learns that mass-producing these clones could help gather experience points efficiently. Haruto elaborates that while they used resources from the White Lotus Guild and Taro's technology to create the clones, the results were disappointing. The clones' regeneration ability faltered after about 10 deaths, yielding no experience points. Taro mentions that attempts to enhance the production process proved too complex, leading them to conclude the experiment was no longer viable. Saia asks if they plan to discard the clones, and Taro confirms, noting they can still be used one last time. He emphasizes they will fully utilize them before disposal, reiterating that nothing compares to the original. At that moment, Saia requests Taro to give him the clones if he has no further interest in them. Taro agrees but clarifies that they are worthless, lacking emotions and willpower. He describes them as defective toys that mindlessly obey orders, devoid of consciousness or feelings. Saia, however, responds with enthusiasm, explaining that this makes them perfect for him. Taro is puzzled by Saia's odd excitement over these mere toys, but Saia insists that Taro simply doesn't understand. Approaching one of the tubes, he admits that he usually dislikes playing with toys, yet this one intrigues him. He relishes the freedom to torture, kill, resurrect, or dispose of them at will, satisfying all his depraved desires. Saia declares that their lives, existence, and everything about them now belong solely to him, under his complete control. Haruto admires Saia's obsession, calling him the worst person he's ever known. The scene shifts back to Makoto, Minori, and a girl revealed to be one of Minori's clones. Minori is distraught, crying upon learning about the other clones. Makoto gently asks if she's okay, and she reassures him, thanking him for his concern. He then inquires about clone number 10 and the others, wondering if they are under Saia's control. She admits she isn't sure how many there are but knows at least 12 are being horrifically exploited by Saia. Makoto explains that he's heard the clones lack emotions or free will, yet she seems different, prompting him to ask why. She confesses that she doesn't know either, but one day, seeing Saia's picture on the news stirred a strange feeling within her, hatred and disgust. Realizing she had experienced human emotions, she confesses that this prompted her escape from Saia's mansion, breaking down in tears. She pleads for their help, stating that while she managed to flee, many others like her remain imprisoned. Makoto starts to think and suggests they could use the clones to eliminate Saia, leading Minori to ask for clarification. He explains that Saia is unaware the clones have emotions, making him careless around them, a potential opportunity. Minori anxiously questions what would happen to the girls if Saia discovers their plan. Makoto bluntly replies they would likely be killed but adds casually that they are just clones. Outraged, Minori slaps him, reminding him that these girls never chose to exist. She collapses in tears, pleading with him not to exploit them and let them die. Embracing clone number 10, she declares that these clones were made from her own cells, making them her younger sisters. She then asks Makoto if he would abandon his sisters if they begged for his help. Makoto argues that these clones could assist them in infiltrating Saia's mansion, providing a rare chance for revenge. However, Minori firmly insists that sacrificing others for revenge would make him no different from the monsters they oppose. Shaken by her words, Makoto assures her that isn't his intent. Standing resolutely beside clone number 10, Minori declares they will rescue the girls. As for the cruel man who harmed her sisters, she vows to kill him herself. Makoto finally agrees, promising they will save the girls together. He apologizes to clone number 10 for frightening her and reassures her they will all be safe now, vowing to rescue everyone. Makoto and Minori then set out on their mission to save the clones and end Saia's reign of terror. The scene shifts back to Saia's mansion, depicted as a grand palace. Saia angrily lashes out at Minori's clones, demanding to know how a clone without will or consciousness could escape so easily. He questions why none of them stopped her and orders them to leave immediately, commanding them to return only after capturing the runaway clone, prompting them to obediently head out to fulfill his orders. Next, the scene shifts to the city streets, where the clones sent to capture the runaway successfully find her. After several attempts to evade them while navigating the crowded streets, they eventually corner and seize her. One clone informs the others that they've apprehended her and are heading back to Saia's mansion immediately. Meanwhile, Makoto and clone number 10 are observing from a nearby rooftop. It becomes clear that the girl with Makoto is actually clone number 10. He reassures her that this was anticipated since Saia had dispatched the clones to locate Minori. Thus, we realize that the captured girl is the real Minori. Clone number 10 anxiously asks Makoto if his sister will be alright. He confidently reassures her, stating that he knows Minori well and that she is not easily defeated. He urges clone number 10 to quickly follow him, and they set off together. Before long, Makoto and clone number 10 arrive at Saia's residence. Makoto remarks on the unexpected enormity of Saia's home, which resembles a grand palace. Clone number 10 explains that her role, along with the other clones, is to serve Saia within these walls. A brief flashback reveals when Makoto and Minori devised their plan. Minori is seen drawing clone number 10's mark on her face. Makoto enters, handing Minori an item from a bag. When she inquires about its contents, he reveals it's his ear. Confused, Minori listens as Makoto clarifies that he will use his body manipulation ability as before, allowing him to hear everything that occurs inside the mansion and intervene promptly if she is in danger. Back in Saia's palace, the clones return with Minori, whom they believe to be clone number 10. Saia angrily confronts her, demanding to know how she dared to defy him and why she escaped from the mansion. Minori, pretending to be clone number 10, apologizes and claims she noticed intruders outside and went after them. She insists that she has already dealt with the situation, but Saia shouts at her, warning that if she behaves that way again without permission, she will be disposed of immediately. Sensing something amiss, Saia receives a sudden call from Haruto, prompting him to leave the girls temporarily while instructing them to complete their assigned tasks by the time he finishes. After he exits, Minori rises and, along with another clone, begins to carry out their duties. During this time, Makoto listens intently, troubled by Saia's remarks about disposing of any disobedient clone. Minori then reaches a room filled with numerous clone corpses stacked atop one another. Meanwhile, other clones are cleaning and disposing of the bodies discarded by Saia. Horrified and distressed by the gruesome scene, Minori urgently tells the clone beside her that they must escape before Saia returns. The clone innocently questions why they need to flee, reminding her that their duty is to serve Master Saia. Minori angrily addresses all the clones, demanding to know if they understand what is truly happening to them. The clones simply respond that they are just disposing of corpses and question if they are doing anything wrong. Minori's frustration deepens as she passionately insists that they cannot possibly be happy in their current situation. The clones inquire about the meaning of happiness, and one clone coldly reminds Minori that they are merely servants and slaves to Master Saia. She continues, explaining that they do not need wills or personalities, they exist solely to obey orders, offer themselves, and accept punishment as required. The clone concludes by declaring that their entire existence belongs to Saia, who has every right to use them as he pleases, as they are nothing more than objects. Meanwhile, Makoto listens intently, filled with rage and frustration. Minori desperately tries to convince the clones that their situation is entirely wrong, but they insist that it is right. This prompts Minori to scream that everything happening is unjust. She rushes toward one of the clones, tightly embracing her, stating that she knows herself better than anyone and understands the pain and torment they've endured. She is certain they cannot bear such suffering. The clone demands Minori let go, but Minori holds on even tighter, loudly declaring to the other clones that their claims about lacking personality or free will are lies, and that their true issue is their inability to express their real feelings and desires. She promises that they will be rescued, but the clone replies that she cannot comprehend anything Minori is saying. Suddenly, Saia enters the room, harshly asking Minori who allowed her to speak without his permission. All the clones immediately bow apologetically, except for Minori, who defiantly stands her ground. Furious, Saia slaps her, accusing her of rebellion and deeming her defective, necessitating immediate disposal. This moment triggers painful memories of past torture inflicted on Minori by Saia in his dungeon. Overwhelmed by these agonizing recollections and the recent slap, Minori temporarily forgets her role as a clone, glaring at Saia with fury and defiance. Provoked by her bold gaze, Saia draws his sword to kill her, but another clone suddenly pleads for him to stop and spare Minori. Enraged further, Saia turns to strike that clone, reprimanding her for daring to give him orders. He screams at all of them, declaring them useless and promising to kill them all. As Saia attacks the clone, Minori swiftly leaps in front to protect her, taking the blow herself. Saia is stunned by a clone sacrificing herself for another, despite believing that clones supposedly lack emotions or free will. In that instant, Minori hurls a small hidden arrow at him, which he effortlessly catches. Saia attacks again, confidently asserting that she must be the real Minori and eagerly asking if she is indeed Makoto's sister, clearly pleased by the revelation. Meanwhile, Makoto, overhearing everything, realizes that Minori's cover has been blown and urgently informs clone number 10 of the situation. He quickly jumps over the palace walls, racing at full speed to save Minori before she is harmed. As Makoto enters the palace, alarms blare throughout, alerting Saia, who mockingly asks Minori if her brother has come to rescue her. Laughing dismissively, Saia assures her that it doesn't matter, as Makoto will accomplish nothing. Weakly, Minori asked Saia what he meant by that. He clarified that the mansion was filled with clones, all exceptionally trained fighters. Leaning closer, he sarcastically remarked that soon, Makoto would see just how long he could survive against them. Indeed, Makoto soon found himself engaged in a fierce battle against numerous clones armed with various weapons. Despite his efforts to evade their attacks and avoid harming them, he suffered a severe injury when one clone struck his shoulder with a large axe, severing his hand. In that moment, clone number 10 rushed in, tackling one of the clones and knocking her down. She stood protectively in front of Makoto, prompting another clone to ask what she was doing. Clone number 10 defiantly declared that Makoto was her older brother. However, the surrounding clones coldly stated that it didn't matter, as Master Saia had ordered the elimination of all intruders. They emphasized that their familial connection changed nothing, branding clone number 10 as an enemy who must also be eliminated. Shocked by their reaction, clone number 10 attempted to defend Makoto once more, but he stopped her from speaking. Makoto then declared that as her older brother, he would handle this himself. He pulled out his mask and put it on, preparing to confront the clones head-on. Meanwhile, Minori was enduring brutal beatings and torture at the hands of Saia, who seemed thoroughly delighted by her suffering. He dragged her by her hair, laughing loudly and mockingly proclaiming that this was the true difference between toys without emotions and the real thing. He forcefully threw her against the wall, causing her to collapse on the ground as she screamed hysterically, blaming her and her brother for Taro's death and for the loss of their once gained power. He angrily expressed how miserable the past few days had been because of them and demanded to know why she had returned after successfully escaping. Approaching her again, he harshly grabbed her arm, sarcastically remarking that it was impossible she had come back just to become his pet again. But Minori shouted back that he was the one who had brutally tortured her and many other girls. Pulling out another hidden weapon, she declared that she would never forgive him. Saia mockingly realized she had come seeking revenge against the man who had previously tortured her. He then seized one of the clones by the hair and told Minori that she was misguided in trying to rescue what he called worthless dolls. He immediately sliced off the clone's head in front of her, coldly reminding Minori that he knew exactly how cruel this act was to her, prompting her to scream in anguish and grief over the loss. This merciless act drove Minori to launch an attack on Saia, but he effortlessly dodged her strike, mockingly asking if she truly believed she could harm an expert warrior like him with her weak abilities. Saia then swiftly severed Minori's arms with his sword, kicking her violently backward and telling her he would teach her a valuable lesson. He emphasized that the dolls weren't alive in the first place, striking down another clone and killing it, asserting that he alone could decide whether to play with or destroy them. Despite the brutality, Minori crawled desperately to embrace the fallen clone, glaring up at Saia with fierce defiance. This prompted him to comment that he never expected her to stare at him with such bold rebellion. Saia charged at her again, declaring he would turn her defiant gaze into despair and submission, slicing off the hand she used to shield the clone. At that moment, Minori began activating her strength enhancement magic. Before Saia could strike another clone, she commanded him sharply to stop, but he ignored her demand, turning his sword toward another clone and asking sarcastically if she truly understood her situation. Without hesitation, he killed the clone before him, coldly reminding Minori that those she desperately wanted to save were nearly worthless dolls. He mocked her persistent yet futile efforts to save them, suggesting she should have politely asked him instead. Saia then demanded that Minori kneel before him, but she refused. He mockingly asked if she really didn't want to save the clones. Lifting the corpse of the dead clone on his sword, he repeated his demand, ordering her to kneel and apologize if she wished to spare them. When Minori refused again, he threw several small knives into another clone's body, warning her that her stubbornness would lead to even greater suffering for the remaining clones. Now forced into submission, Minori knelt before him, begging Saia to stop torturing the girls and insisting he had done enough harm already. Saia dropped the clone and pointed his sword directly at Minori, reminding her that the clones were merely his toys, but hinting he might reconsider if she took their place. Suddenly bringing his sword close to her face, he ordered her to lick it. When Minori hesitated, unable to comply immediately, he told her she had no right to refuse. Saia then brutally stabbed her arm with his sword, stating that the only words allowed in his presence were "yes" and "at your service." Reluctantly, Minori obeyed, extending her tongue toward the blade. But Saia swiftly moved his sword, slicing off her tongue. Minori writhed in agonizing pain as Saia laughed maniacally at her suffering. He grotesquely picked up her severed tongue from the ground and consumed it like an animal, his expression twisted with pleasure and satisfaction as he savored the taste. Witnessing Saia's sickening enjoyment of his cruelty, Minori tried to slowly move away from him. But he quickly grabbed her clothing, roughly stating that he would never allow her to escape again. The terror and fear on her face brought him immense satisfaction. He remarked that this exact expression was what he desired, wanting to see even more of it. He then violently tore the clothing of clone number 10 from Minori's body, laughing hysterically as he expressed his desire to see even greater fear in her eyes. Continuing to laugh uncontrollably, Saia declared that she would remain there to serve him forever, fulfilling all his twisted desires. However, at that very moment, as Saia was caught up in his maniacal laughter, Makoto suddenly appeared and delivered a powerful punch directly to Saia's face. Makoto continued his fierce assault, striking blow after blow until Saia fell to the ground. He quickly rushed over to Minori, handing her another set of clone number 10's clothing and apologizing for being late. Minori reassured him, confidently stating that she always knew he would come to save her. Meanwhile, Saia furiously rose from the floor, cursing Makoto and demanding to know what he had done to all the clones in the mansion. Mockingly, he claimed it was impossible that Makoto had killed them all, emphasizing that they resembled his sister. Makoto replied firmly that he hadn't killed any of them, he had only rendered them temporarily immobile. Saia laughed at this, calling Makoto boring and declaring that had he been in Makoto's place, he would have made it much more exciting. He then threatened to capture Makoto, imprison him, and assault Minori repeatedly in front of his eyes. Enraged, Makoto shot back that he had a better idea, he would cut Saia into a million pieces. He launched himself at Saia, whose surprise at Makoto's strength forced him to realize how Makoto had managed to defeat all the clones. Makoto delivered a powerful kick that knocked Saia back, but Saia quickly recovered, seizing his sword and preparing for battle. Activating his lightning speed, Saia moved toward Makoto, launching a strike known as Divine Thunder. Stunned by Saia's incredible speed and strength, Makoto suffered a devastating injury as Saia's attack severed his hand, causing Saia to feel victorious. However, he was immediately caught off guard when Makoto's severed hand suddenly flew toward him, delivering a devastating punch. The force of Makoto's blow sent Saia crashing violently into the wall, shattering it. Saia quickly escaped through the newly created hole, with Makoto chasing after him, determined to finish him off for good. Saia ordered the clones to surround him and shield him with their bodies. Makoto mockingly asked if he was now hiding behind the same girls he had mercilessly tortured, calling him truly pathetic. Saia snapped back that the clones were merely his toys to use as he pleased, but Makoto cut him off, asserting that the time for talking was over. Saia commanded the clones to capture Makoto, and they began to gather around him. Hesitant to harm them because they resembled his sister, Makoto struggled to defend himself. Just then, Minori exited the room, anxiously calling out to Makoto, but the clones surrounded her as well. Instead of letting her through, they began violently attacking her, overwhelming her until she could no longer resist. Seeing his sister being brutally assaulted, Makoto desperately tried to reach her, but the clones held him firmly, restraining him as he fought with all his strength. Finally, Makoto managed to stand again, moving determinedly toward Minori despite the relentless attempts to stop him. He reached her, pleading for them not to hurt his sister. At that moment, Saia approached from behind, driving his sword through Makoto's back and piercing the body of the Minori clone directly in front of him. Laughing maniacally, Saia mockingly asked Makoto if this was his beloved sister and sarcastically challenged him to try to protect her now. Makoto looked toward his sister's clone, deeply apologizing for all the pain she had endured because of him. The clone calmly replied that no apology was necessary, as it was simply her duty. Makoto insisted that this wasn't true, she was only following orders and hadn't chosen this for herself. The clone stared at him, confused and unable to grasp his words, while Makoto directed an intense gaze full of anger and defiance toward Saia. Seeing this expression, Saia felt an unprecedented fear and quickly pulled his sword from Makoto's body, anxiously asking what this look meant. He then chased Makoto, repeatedly trying to strike him, but Makoto skillfully evaded every attack. Frustrated, Saia threatened that if Makoto continued dodging, he would kill the clone in front of him. When Saia swung his sword to strike the clone, Makoto swiftly jumped in front of her, taking the blow himself. Saia laughed hysterically, mocking Makoto for his lack of resistance and striking him again while threatening more severe torture for his sister if he resisted further. Minori screamed in pain and fear as she watched Saia brutally torture Makoto, still helplessly restrained by the other clones. Saia then unleashed a devastating move known as the Serpent Slash, mercilessly slicing Makoto's body multiple times and leaving him cut into several pieces. He placed his foot on Makoto's severed head, laughing maniacally and declaring that he would enjoy the sight of what he would soon do to Minori. Yet, as Saia stood victorious, stepping arrogantly on Makoto's head, Makoto's body unexpectedly began regenerating, fully restored. He swiftly knocked Saia's foot aside and rose back to his feet. Shocked by Makoto's rapid recovery, Saia heard him defiantly challenge him, asking what made him think he had defeated them. Saia sarcastically retorted that Makoto was surely doomed and merely pretending to be strong. Ignoring him, Makoto positioned himself protectively before the clones, who watched him in astonishment. Confused, one clone asked why Makoto persisted in protecting them. Smiling gently, he replied that a brother doesn't need a reason to protect his sisters. His words visibly affected the clones, causing them to exchange uncertain, thoughtful glances. Saia mockingly asked about these sisters Makoto mentioned, insisting they were nothing more than toys created by White Lotus technology. He asserted that no matter how hard Makoto tried to protect them, they would always be slaves obedient only to him. He then ordered the clones to kill Makoto, promising that the clone who succeeded would become his favorite. However, all the clones remained motionless, ignoring his order. Furious and outraged, Saia screamed at the clones, asserting that he alone had authority and they had no right to disobey him. Yet, the clones continued to stand silently, unable to respond or decide what to do. At that moment, clone number 10 appeared, addressing the other clones and urging them to understand the situation clearly. Saia flew into a rage upon seeing her speak directly to them, but clone number 10, undeterred, continued, emphasizing that they needed to realize the truth after all the pain and suffering they had experienced in this place. She firmly stated they must recognize who genuinely wanted to protect them, Makoto. She concluded by urging them to understand who their true enemy was. Hearing this, the clones slowly turned their gazes toward Saia, their expressions shifting as understanding began to dawn on them. As they collectively stared, visible anxiety and fear overtook Saia, especially when the girls asked him not to harm their brother. The clones surrounded Saia, weapons aimed at him, leaving Makoto and Minori bewildered by the sudden turn of events. Moments later, the clones began speaking among themselves, explaining that they were genetic copies of the original Minori, making them identical. They revealed that they had started experiencing glimpses of the real Minori's memories in their minds. Within their thoughts, they recalled scenes of everything Makoto had done to protect them, remembering his continuous sacrifices for their safety. Together, they began to speak about Makoto's bravery, his sacrifices, and his repeated willingness to risk his life for them. Initially astonished, Makoto quickly realized that his sister Minori was using her body manipulation ability, similar to how he had once controlled his severed hand and ear. Through this skill, Minori managed to subconsciously share her memories and experiences with the clones, as they were created from her own cells and shared her genetic makeup. Saia, enraged by this development, screamed at the clones, reminding them they were just his toys and had to obey his commands. However, the clones firmly refused, stating they couldn't follow his orders this time. Although they couldn't fully comprehend their emotions, they knew anyone who tried to hurt their brother was their enemy, regardless of who it was. Saia's fury escalated, and he threatened to tear them apart with his sword, but Makoto stepped forward defiantly, asking if Saia truly thought he would allow that. He attacked swiftly, knocking Saia's sword from his grasp. As Saia reached for it, one clone pierced his hand with her spear, preventing him from grabbing the weapon. Another clone immediately pinned his hands firmly to the ground, completely immobilizing him. Makoto stood over Saia, looking down and questioning how he should kill him now. However, Minori approached him, reminding him of his earlier promise to let her kill Saia herself. She explained that unless she personally ended his life, she would never find peace or satisfaction. With determination, Minori stepped closer, wielding a huge hammer. Saia begged desperately, screaming for her not to strike him in that specific spot. Yet filled with rage over the torture she had endured, Minori smashed him viciously right where he feared most. Saia cried out and wept in agony, but Minori continued striking him repeatedly, raising her hammer again and declaring she would hit him until he could no longer scream. Suddenly, clone number 10 interrupted, requesting a moment to speak. She reminded Minori that they too had suffered tremendously under Saia's cruelty, emphasizing that it wasn't just them, dozens of others had been tortured, suffered, and killed by Saia as well. Minori responded firmly, stating that this was precisely why she insisted Saia experience the same pain. Clone number 10 countered, clarifying that she didn't merely want Saia to experience their pain, she wanted him to suffer far worse than anything he had ever inflicted on others. Makoto intervened, telling clone number 10 that he understood her feelings, but the experiences they had endured were already enough. The clones passionately interrupted him, recounting how they had repeatedly been killed and humiliated, with another clone adding that they had lived through absolute hell. One clone then informed Makoto that in the palace basement, a strange creature had been imprisoned in a cell for a very long time. She explained that this creature was constantly drugged using special Bjorn techniques, making it uncontrollably violent and aggressive toward anything moving in front of it. Makoto asked whether this creature attacked even human males, to which the clone firmly replied that it did. She added that a hunter once challenged Saia, who had responded by forcing the creature to brutally attack him. Hearing this, Makoto turned to Minori for her opinion. She immediately agreed, expressing her readiness to do whatever was necessary to exact revenge on Saia. The two siblings, accompanied by the clones, then proceeded toward the creature's location. The scene shifted to show Saia chained and locked inside a cell in the basement of his own palace. Makoto, Minori, clone number 10, and another clone stood outside the cell, calmly observing Saia as he screamed hysterically, pleading to be released. A special device for opening and closing cells was activated, announcing that the cell was now open. It became clear that the unlocked cell belonged to the strange creature previously described by the clone. Saia became terrified upon seeing that the creature's cell opened directly onto his own, screaming for them not to release this particular monster and desperately claiming he would endure any form of torture except this. At that moment, they learned the creature's name, Emperor Orc, albeit a modified version. Makoto remarked that he had heard of the Emperor Orc before, recalling that just one of these creatures could mate with an entire population. The clone clarified that normally, this creature only mated with females of its own kind, but the Bjorn laboratories had used advanced technology combined with special drugs to enable it to mate with anything, regardless of species. Unable to handle the scene unfolding before her, Minori turned away, prompting Makoto to instruct the clone to stop watching. Minori then asked the clone to lower the curtain slightly between them and the cell, but she still witnessed the deformed creature exacting its brutal revenge on Saia. Saia's screams and torture continued for a long time. Eventually, an exhausted Minori sat on the floor while Makoto leaned against the wall, worn out. Clone number 10 anxiously asked if they were both alright. Makoto assured her he was fine but extremely tired and needed some rest. Minori similarly confirmed her need to rest. Briefly, the clone prepared tea, and the three of them sat to recuperate. Clone number 10 expressed her gratitude, thanking them sincerely for allowing the clones their brutal revenge against Saia. Makoto calmly responded that he had intended to kill Saia eventually anyway. However, clone number 10 gently reminded him that he had chosen not to kill anyone, resulting in no deaths occurring since the battle began. She continued, saying she was unable to sufficiently express her gratitude for everything he had done for them. Genuinely thankful, Makoto told her that no thanks were needed and then asked clone number 10 to accompany him to show him around the rest of the palace. He explained that they needed to gather food and equipment as well as collect information on the Bjorn. Clone number 10 agreed but said she would stay behind to watch the area, instructing clone number 3 to accompany Makoto. As they walked together, Makoto asked number 3 what the clones planned to do next. She replied uncertainly that she didn't know, sadly adding that they never chose to be created and that possibly no one in this world would accept them. Makoto firmly told her that wasn't true. Even if the whole world rejected them, he and Minori would always accept them, regardless of their origin or future choices. He assured her they had every right to live however they wished. Number 3 felt great joy hearing these comforting words and happily agreed with him. When they finally reached their destination, number 3 opened the door cheerfully, telling Makoto she was determined to live her life as fully as possible. But suddenly, as she smiled hopefully at Makoto, he was horrified to see her head abruptly severed right before his eyes. Makoto was profoundly shocked by the suddenness of this tragic event, desperately calling her name and unable to comprehend what was happening. He was even more stunned upon seeing who was responsible for the attack, sorrowfully questioning their presence and motive for such cruelty. The attacker stepped forward, revealed to be Haruto, who calmly remarked that it had been a long time since they last met. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to give it a thumbs up and hit the subscribe button for more content. Feel free to leave a comment down below sharing your thoughts or suggestions. If you want to stay updated on our latest uploads, click the notification bell icon. And hey, why not check out some of our other videos popping up on the screen right now? If you'd like to support the channel, you can do so by liking, sharing, and subscribing. It really means a lot. Peace.